Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at the f.p.journe Chronometre Souverain, 40 millimeters in platinum. You can purchase this f.p.journe on our website, watchyouwant.com, and if you like these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Watch You Want Inc. Now you can see on my wrist the watch that many consider to be something like the absolute standard, the go-to, the definitive f.p.journe model. From 2005 to the present, the Chronometre Souverain has been an icon of the brand. And that's saying something, because he doesn't introduce many models and he doesn't build many watches. By most accounts, no more than 800 or 900 per year. So you're looking at a rare sight, but a definitive one. Now on my wrist, 6 1/3 inches, 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see one of the reasons why this watch is so universally loved. It wears with beautifully compact classical proportions, 40 millimeters in diameter and yet only 8.6 millimeters thick. It has a little bit of a rounded case back, so it does kind of nestle into the wrist and sit even lower than its nominal thickness, which is already quite thin. It has a beautiful rounded, almost convex bezel that allows a long sleeve or a dress cuff to easily ride up and over. And you can see, although it's not a large watch, f.p.journe did pare down the size of the lugs so that they don't project far beyond the case, meaning although it has the visual impact of a 40 millimeter watch, it wears with the compact ergonomic ease of a classical 40s, 50s, or 60s ultra thin 34, 35, 36 millimeter men's dress watch. So compact, it wears even more so, and every element is beautifully tailored. You can see how the lugs, although strong with clearly defined character lines that flow and continue through the polished flank of the case, the lugs are beautifully tapered both to continue the curvature of the bezel as it cants downward and flow seamlessly into the lightly bolstered double-sided alligator leather strap. I want to talk about that because the use of a contrasting alligator round scale on the back matching the alligator square scale on the top is something you hardly ever see on luxury watches. Usually it's alligator on top for formality, toughness, and durability, and then the less expensive calfskin on the bottom. Here, on this Journe factory strap, you see alligator on both sides, and not just alligator, but contrasting scale patterns. Very impressive. Likewise, the small attention to detail is what sets Journe apart. You can see the easy pull-tab spring bars inset at the end, so you can easily remove these straps if you like and swap it out in favor of the universe of options that Journe himself offers for this watch. So no, it's not a Panerai, but yes, you can easily swap the strap, change the look as your mood suits with no need to take a screwdriver or a jeweler's tool to these gorgeous platinum lugs. And finally, I want to call attention to the fact that the integration of the aesthetics has been comprehensively considered, and although we've examined some respects in which that is true, there's one more, and this is the semi-conforming spring bar. You can see how it does contour to the curvature of the flank of the case, so it reduces the visual gap. Very elegant, very coherent, and yet it doesn't have that completely flush fit end piece that can make for a stiff and unpleasant experience on the wrist in watches that use total conforming end pieces or conforming straps at the lugs. A nice compromise, and one that creates a much more unified vision when seen from overhead. As you can see, hardly any visual gap from strap to case to strap. Finally, a simple, classical, and highly convenient engraved f.p.journe platinum pin buckle. Now, if a platinum pin buckle seems a little bit elementary, well, of course it's platinum, Tim. Just remember, there are many high horology houses, very prestigious brands. I'm not going to badmouth them here. I'm not going to name names, but you can do a quick Google and find them, that are now shipping platinum watches with white gold pin buckles and white gold deployants to save money. No, it's not the way I would prefer, and it's not the way Journe will tolerate. In fact, the only gold on this watch is going to be found on the dial, which is a silvered and guilloche blazon, solid gold, and the movement, which is a solid 18-karat rose gold. First, let's talk about the dial. The dial is a classical Journe composition, which is to say some traditional elements like the circumferential railroad minute track, and of course the different layers of guilloche, circular brushed on the outside, inset sub-registers for the power reserve and the small seconds, and then an intricate and finely done clou de Paris, sort of diagonal cross-hatching about the center of the dial. Now you'll note the distinctive heat blued Journe hands. They're not brigade, they're not spade, they're not broadsword, or any other style that can be definitively named with historical terminology. Rather, I would say the closest thing that comes to mind is the old Mark Newson Ichabod hands, but these have become very much the Journe hands. You say the Journe hands today, people know exactly what you're speaking of. This distinctive tapered design, and they pair beautifully with this sort of neoclassical image. Now, there is something I want to highlight here. On this inset power reserve at 3 o'clock, the way the Journe power reserves work is a little bit backwards. What you're actually looking at when you see 56 for the 56 plus or minus 2 hour power reserve of the caliber 1304, 56 is going to be the number of hours since you've wound it when it's almost completely discharged. And you'll see, as I wind the watch, the power reserve hand actually moves closer to 0, which is just to say that when it reaches 0, it will have been 0 hours since I fully wound the watch. It's a little bit quirky, but this is just Journe's way of saying, you know what? My watches are different, and consciously so. I want you to take notice of it. I want you to be a little bit more proactive about examining and acknowledging the features that make this watch different. And you can see one last classical element that is featured on this watch, because f.p.journe got his start restoring and creating pocket watches, is the classically pocket watch system of offsetting the subregisters, more or less allowing them to fall where the underlying mechanism is located on the movement, hence the decentralized calculated asymmetry of those subregisters. Now, the caseback is equally a highlight. This is the caliber 1304 18-karat rose gold. It's got more than a few tricks up its sleeve, but the first one and the standout is the fact that it's a movement made of solid gold. Now, apart from a few Jaeger-LeCoultre tourbillon reverso movements that I know of from the 90s and the early 2000s, as well as the 70e reverso, the 70th anniversary edition, gold movements are not something you see too often. Now, in 1994, f.p.journe started experimenting with this technique, but it wasn't until the end of 2004, the beginning of 2005, that he managed to serialize it, not on an industrial scale, because he doesn't do that, but just to the point that it would now be reliable and consistently excellent. Debuting for 2005, the Chronometre Souverain was one of the first watches to arrive with this movement as standard equipment. You can see twin barrel design, 22 jewels. The standard of finish is beautiful, but in many ways, Journe lets the architecture of the movement and the raw materials tell the tale. This isn't the blinding shine of a Patek Philippe or Vacheron movement. This is a watch that is all about the machinery. It's all about telling the history of the watch, from the marine chronometer style arrangement to the broad open channels between the individual moving parts of the power, the train, the balance, the escapement. In fact, it's worth noting that you can only see the balance and the escapement, and you can only see the power supplying elements because the train wheels are hidden under the dial of the watch, creating what Journe terms his mystery balance. You can see the power and you can see its effect, but you can't actually see how it's transmitted across the movement, and that's the mystery. That's part of the intrigue. When I say Journe likes to make the user, the owner of his watch, look a little bit deeper to notice how and why it's different, that's just part of the process. But it does conform to many contemporary standards, adjusted in 6 positions. Although it's called the Chronometre Souverain, it is not a COSC chronometer, but it does meet those timing standards. This is kind of Journe, once again, thumbing his nose at convention. You're not supposed to, by convention in the Swiss industry, use the word chronometer or chronometre anywhere on your watch if it doesn't pass through the COSC. Journe's message to them, try to stop me. Now, we have put this watch on our timing machine, and yes, it does in fact meet COSC, so point Mr. Journe. Now, you do see a free-sprung balance right here, so very modern in its ability to shake off vibrations, shocks, any casual insult on the wrist that might otherwise displace a mobile stud or mobile regulator. Likewise, laser welded at the collet, Journe transparently employs those contemporary techniques of fabrication and regulation. There are variable inertia balance blocks on the balance itself, but what you're looking at here is the gorgeous linear Côte de Genève, the red gold expressing itself, the tight and even perlage pattern below the balance cock and the balance wheel, what he calls moulet soleil rayon, outboard of all of the elements of the mainspring barrels. You can see there is sort of a sunburst radiating out in the gold of the base plate around the mainspring barrels themselves. And yes, as I mentioned earlier, it does have a 56-hour power reserve. The point of the twin barrels being even output of torque over the full extent of the power reserve. This isn't a watch that's designed for monster autonomy between windings. It's a watch that's designed, true to its name, to function with the precision of a chronometre. You can see this f.p.journe Chronometre Souverain 40mm in platinum on our website, watchyouwant.com.